Welcome traders. In this video we're going to go over the trades from Friday, December 14th. And Friday, December 14th was a particularly volatile day in that the S&P lost nearly 2% and was down over 50 points. I wanted to take a look at the trades if we had followed a trading plan and executed that trading plan, what that would have given us as far as either good or bad trades on a really crazy day. Now what you're going to see on the chart is you're going to see where I have placed circles in red when all of the elements of a trade have not been met. And the four elements to the trade are the following: that we have a price pattern on the 500 tick chart, which you see in front of us. We do not have a price pattern on the 150 tick chart that is giving us a red flag. The third thing I want to see is delta strength, either on the order flow or the point and figure chart. And the fourth thing I want to see is order flow itself. So if we had all four of those things come together at a known trading pattern, then that would be circled in green. And if something was wrong, if there was some kind of red flag, that is circled in red. Okay, so for the first trade, we have an exhaustion trade. And we did have an exhaustion sell signal in the ZTP order flow, but we did not have delta strength. The second trade, we had a tick divergence trade that right as the market touched the blue counter trend zone, the tick divergence became non-tick divergence. And if you would have taken that trade, we would have expected only to retrace back to the intermediate support zone, which is exactly what happened. And while that trade was good for 3 or 4 points, because it became non-tick divergent, that's why that is circled in red. We did have delta strength and we did have an exhaustion sell and a ZTP order flow sell there. At the trend trade itself, we had order flow in the form of a ZTP order flow buy, but we did not have any delta strength. On this next trend trade, we again had order flow in the form of a POC absorption and a ZTP order flow, but we did not have any delta strength. And if you're noticing a pattern here, you're seeing these 3-point trades where we have a pattern, we have order flow, but we don't have anybody making a big commitment. We don't have large buyers or sellers coming in to make that big commitment and move the market. Now, the next trade that comes up would be this trend trade. And this trend trade is a trade that I would not be interested in taking. What we've done is we've traded from blue zone to blue zone, and then we've additionally traded up to the strong trend zone. According to the theory, what we should see is we should see a retracement back to minor, which we did get. And then we did get this 2-point pop right here. But then price traded down even further and through the intermediate support zone. And that sets up a broken reversal trade here. So for this reason, I wouldn't be interested in taking a trade from here for any reason, because our reward is very much limited and we are only going to be looking to be trading to the next intermediate resistance zone here. So next we trade into the broken reversal where we have the POC extension sell and we see a 14-15 point trade out of that. The next trade, we have a tick divergence exhaustion trade where we have delta strength along with the exhaustion sell and ZTP order flow signal, and that trade was good for 6 or 7 points. That trade was followed by a trend trade which had both the POC extension and POC absorption order flow along with delta strength. As price reached the blue counter trend zone, we had a tick divergence trade that had both delta strength and the POC extension and exhaustion signals. And this traded into a trend trade which I marked in red right here. And the reason I did that is the following. We normally wouldn't want to be taking anything after a tick divergence or exhaustion trade in the opposite direction because of what we see from back here. Normally we trade from blue to blue. So because of that, This necessarily wouldn't have been a trade that we would have circled in green and taken, but we would want to be a seller here if we were long from that tick divergence trade. We had gotten 4 points out of that trade already, and we saw the delta strength along with the point and control extension and absorption signals come in. Combine that with the fact that it is a trend trade, and that would be sufficient enough reason to be closing that trade. The following exhaustion trade here did give us a ZTP order flow as we traded right here. There was no delta strength. However, what is also important to note is what the 150 tick chart was doing as price touched the blue counter trend zone. As price is touching the blue counter trend zone, you see from the 150 tick chart that we are in a strong bearish trend, and I have put in red the area that we would not want to be traders because we are at an extremely high risk. We expect to see a bounce back to the minor resistance level, which is what we got. And if anything, we would have wanted to be a seller here rather than be a buyer. The reason would be that this would be a strong trend pattern. However, if you're going to be taking that trade, you're going to have to accept additional risk, and that's why this is not marked as a trade. That additional risk, you'd have to be placing your stop up here in order to be taking this trade. The next trade that we see is a trend trade where we had no order flow as price traded through that trend trade. And the next trade we see is a reversal trade. And this reversal trade is set up by the trend trade that fails right here. And as you can see, we did have an exhaustion sell and a ZTP order flow sell, but we didn't have any delta strength except for the delta strength that came in right here. So for that reason, even though it was a great trade, I put that in red because we didn't have the delta strength at or near the apex of the trade, and we didn't have it on the point and figure delta strength chart either. Next, we have a tick divergence exhaustion trade down here where we did have delta strength on the point and figure chart, but the order flow didn't come in for another bar, and by that time price had already reached the intermediate resistance zone. So that is the reason that that is marked in red, even though that went for 5 or 6 points. Here we have a trend trade that didn't give us any order flow on the way down. Here we have a trend trade that didn't give us any order flow on the way up. And this leads us into a very interesting pattern that is the reason why we have the rules that we have. You see that the price is traded on the 500 tick chart from blue zone to blue zone. That is a strong trend reversal. And at the high here, the tick divergence went away, and we know this because there's a small black dot here, but the tick divergence label went from black to red, signifying that there no longer is tick divergence. And when we trade from blue zone to blue zone on a strong trend reversal, we expect only a retracement to minor, which is exactly what we got. One of the other things that I found interesting about this is you see the fight between the order flow charts going from red to green and red to green, red to green. And when that is seen in and of itself, that's an indication that there is a fight going on here, and probably the best idea is to stay away from it. Up here we had another exhaustion trade that became non-tick divergent. You can see that we did have a POC absorption and a ZTP order flow, but we did not have any delta strength, which again was kind of disappointing because we had a very good trade develop out of it. The delta strength did come in along with more order flow here, and it possibly could have been taken from that point. However, it's not according to the rules, so we left that in red. We next see a reversal trade here because of this trend trade that failed, and with that reversal trade, we see both a ZTP order flow and a trapped buyer, along with delta strength on the point and figure chart. Next, we have a trend trade that failed because there was no order flow. And then that took us down into this tick divergence trade down here, where we had a stopping ratio along with the order flow, and we had delta strength on the point and figure chart. That we next traded into a exhaustion long trade that had no delta strength or order flow to it, and then traded into a second exhaustion trade that was non-tick divergent, and I marked that in red because it was no longer tick divergent. At the second tick divergence, just 2 bars later, while we did again have order flow, we didn't have any delta strength. We had a trend trade here that did have order flow, but it did not have any delta strength. Next, we had a tick divergence trade here, which had the ZTP order flow along with delta strength on the point and figure chart. On this tick divergence trade, as price traded to the counter trend zone here, while it was still tick divergent, we did see a POC extension order flow signal, but we did not have any delta strength come in on either this or the point and figure chart. We next had an exhaustion trade here, which did have the ZTP order flow, but it did not have any delta strength. And again, on the 150 tick chart, we were in a strong trend at this point, telling us that this is a trade that should be avoided. We had a trend trade here which had no order flow, and then we traded into a tick divergence exhaustion trade which had a significant amount of order flow to it, and on the point and figure chart also had a delta strength. And that takes us into a set of interesting trades here. Just as before, where we traded from blue zone to blue zone and then into the strong trend area, we are expecting a broken reversal pattern. Now, I've circled this in green because it did have a point of control absorption exhaustion signal being given here, and it did have delta strength also. But because of the type of pattern that we were trading into, while that is something that is circled in green, it is not something I would be interested in taking. However, as we traded up into here, where we would expect to again see resistance, we did have delta strength and a trapped seller signal, along with other significant order flow during that entire period. Down here at this exhaustion trade, I marked that in red because the market had traded over 4 ticks through the blue zone before the order flow had come in. And while we did have order flow here, as we traded up to here, we saw delta strength on the point and figure chart. So this whole exhaustion trade really looks kind of like a mess. At this tick divergence trade, we did have order flow, although we did not have delta strength. We had, in fact, the opposite of the delta strength. And to take us into the close of the day, we saw another exhaustion trade that was tick divergent. You can see the difference in the tick numbers there. And that did have delta strength and a point of control absorption. And that was a trade that was good for another 10 points. So as we go back and review, we see that we had 4 trades here, the worst of which gave us just 4 points. We had 3 more 4-point trades here, and we had another 3 trades here that gave us 4 points, 4 points, and 10 points. The only trade that I am leaving off of that tally would be the trend trade here, like we had talked about earlier. When you go back and look at the day, there was a significant amount of signals. And the point of this is that just because you have a signal doesn't mean you have a trading opportunity. What you want to do is you want to have a trading system, and that trading system encompasses all four things. It encompasses the price patterns on this 500 tick chart. It encompasses the price patterns on the 150 tick chart. It encompasses the delta strength indicator and the order flow indicator. As you can see, when we put all four of those things together, we never took a losing trade, and we only had one trade that was considered questionable and only gave us 2 points. So all in all, if we stuck with our plan, even though the day itself was crazy, we made a significant profit. And the last thing you really wanted to do was just to be taking every short trade that was indicated without having the appropriate delta strength and order flow to go along with it. Because if that had been what you were doing, you would have ended up being a loser on the day. I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and if you have any questions, be sure to give me a call. Thanks and have a good day.